Welcome to Dead and Roasted. What can I get you?
Thank you so much to everyone who left a comment regarding what kind of roast and flavor a potential Dead and Roasted coffee would have. Some cool things are in the works right now, which I'm hoping reach fruition, but no guarantees as of yet. As a caffeine addict, I'm very excited though. Anyway, today's episode is full of true scary work stories that are quite strange, but were scary enough to actually creep me out. Possibly because the first story is extremely disturbing, and story 4 literally features one of my horror weaknesses. Enjoy. These are tales from the break room. Remember, send me your true scary work stories at eeriecast.com/submit if you want them featured on the show. And help us reach an even bigger audience by following and reviewing Tales from the Break Room on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Thank you. I almost lost my friend. From kodoCody. I know this isn't exactly a work story, but it only happened because of my mom's work schedule. She was a nurse that worked overnights from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. 4 nights a week. This was back in the early 90s, and she was a single mom who was doing her best. I was 11 years old enough to stay home alone and old enough to get myself to bed. She'd leave dinner in the microwave and call around 9 p.m. to make sure I'd eaten. Then she'd call again at 10 to make sure I was in bed. If I didn't answer her calls, I would be in big trouble. The system worked great most of the time. I wasn't the kind of bad kid that wanted to break the rules or make my mom upset. On a certain night around 1993, my friend Mitchell was sleeping over because his parents were out of town, and his older sister didn't want to deal with him. Mom was cool about it. She knew Mitch, thought of him as family, and figured 2 kids together were actually safer than 1 kid alone. Before she left for work, she gave us the usual rules. Dinner was in the kitchen, no leaving the house, lights out by 10, and lock the door behind her. We did everything she asked, except for 2 things. We didn't turn the lights out at 10, and I forgot to lock the front door. That second part haunts me to this very day. She'd reminded me twice, and I'd say, okay, both times. But we were in the middle of playing Super Mario World, and I just didn't do it. Whenever it popped back into my head, I just told myself I would do it the next time I died. But by then I would completely forget. By 11:30, we were still up, sitting on the floor in front of my little 13-inch TV, a controller in one of our hands, with the volume turned down so low, we could hear Mom if she pulled up. She wasn't supposed to actually get back home until about 8 a.m., but sometimes she would get off early if the hospital wasn't busy. We were trying to beat this special world level, which I can't remember how we got to, but I recall us having a lot of trouble. This is just how I remember it. There may have been multiple levels like that, or maybe just 1, but I haven't played Super Mario World in so long. Anyway, it was around that time when we heard the front door of our house open. There wasn't a knock or the jingling of keys, just the slow creaking of the door opening. The sound made my blood go cold. Usually, but not always, Mom would call if she was coming home early, but we hadn't got any calls beyond the regular checkups. Turn it off, Mitchell whispered, already moving toward the pallet we made him on the floor. I hit the power button on the TV, then clicked off the lamp. The room went dark except for the hallway light filtering under my bedroom door. We heard footsteps then. They didn't sound like my mother's. Mitchell was already under his blankets on the floor. I dove into my bed and pulled the covers up, turning to face the wall. My heart was racing. Even then, I was sure whoever was in our house was not my mom. The footsteps moved through the living room, into the kitchen, back to the living room, then down the hallway toward the bedrooms. They stopped right outside my door, and the doorknob turned. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them just barely, looking through my eyelashes. The door swung open slowly, and a man stepped into my room. It wasn't my mom. It wasn't anyone I knew. This was a black man, probably in his 30s, with a thick beard and a dark hooded sweatshirt with the hood up. Even in that low light from the hallway, I could see something was wrong with his left eye. It was like twitching or spasming, making that whole side of his face move in little jerks. He stood in the doorway for what felt like forever, looking into the room. I suddenly wanted to scream, jump up or run, but some instinct, maybe the same one that makes animals play dead, kept me frozen. If I kept pretending to sleep, maybe he'd leave. Maybe he was just a burglar looking for stuff to steal. And maybe he would take the TV and go. But he didn't go to the TV. He walked into the room, footsteps barely making any sound on the carpet. He stepped carefully over Mitchell, and then stopped. He stood there looking down at my friend for a long moment. Then he knelt down. I watched through barely open eyes as this stranger knelt beside my best friend. He reached out and grabbed the corners of Mitchell's blanket, the one my mom had given us from the hall closet for him to lie on. He lifted the corners like he was testing the weight, like you might do if you were about to pick up something wrapped in a sheet. Like he was going to pick Mitchell up, using the blanket like a sling. Mitchell didn't move. I could see him from my angle on the bed. His eyes were squeezed shut. His chest was rising and falling fast. He was awake and he knew what was happening. The man held the blanket corners for maybe 10 seconds. Then, like he had changed his mind or thought better of it, he slowly lowered them back down. He stood up, looked around the room one more time, and looked directly at my bed. I forced myself to breathe slowly and evenly, even though my lungs wanted to explode. He walked out of the room, pulling the door most of the way closed, but not all the way, like he didn't want to make the clicking sound of the latch and wake us up. Playing asleep had worked. We lay there in the dark and listened. The man was still in the house for a while. We heard him moving around and opening drawers in the kitchen, and footsteps in my mom's room. I heard the bathroom door open and close. Every sound made me want to vomit. This went on for around 20 minutes, and finally we heard the front door open and close. Then nothing. We stayed frozen for another 5 minutes, maybe 10, listening. When I couldn't stand it anymore, I whispered, "Mitchell, is he gone?" His voice was so quiet I could barely hear it. "I think so." I slipped out of bed and crawled over to him. In the dim light, I could see tears running down his face. He was shaking. "Was he gonna take me?" he whispered. "Was he gonna pick me up and take me?" I don't know, I said. We sat there on the floor, two terrified kids trying to figure out what to do. I finally decided to creep to the living room and lock the front door, something I should have done hours before. Then I called my mom's unit at the hospital. When she answered, I could barely get the words out. "Mom, someone was in the house." And the next few hours were a blur. Mom left for home immediately, telling us to call 911 and stay on the phone with them until the police arrive. A couple of officers showed up within 10 minutes. They searched the house and the yard. Mom got home just as they were finishing up. I had to describe the man to the police, every detail I could remember. The beard, the hood, the twitching eye, his height, his build. They wrote it all down and needed to know if anything was missing. Mom checked her jewelry box, which had been emptied. Some cash from her dresser was gone too. But that was it. Mitchell's parents came to get him around 2 a.m. His mom was bawling when she heard what happened. Mitchell didn't want to talk about it. He just wanted to go home. And he was never allowed back to our house. The next day, Mom stayed home from work. She told me the police had called. The man matching the description I'd given had been arrested for armed robbery at a gas station about 2 miles from our house. It happened only a little while after our incident, and they knew it was him because they found Mom's jewelry in his pocket. But that's not what I was worried about. I mean, I was relieved the man was caught, but I couldn't stop thinking about why he wanted to take Mitchell and why he changed his mind. As an adult now, I think what happened was he was going to take Mitchell, maybe sell him off for money, but maybe at the last minute he realized kidnapping a kid would bring more heat than just plain robbery. Maybe that moment was all he needed to have a little bit of conscience. But that memory makes me so darn sick when I think of it. And poor Mitchell, he'll have to live with that moment for the rest of his life. We're still good friends, but this is one topic that we don't bring up with each other anymore. I can't stress this enough to anyone listening out there, especially if you're younger. Never forget to lock the door. My walks home were creepy. From SlaneshEnjoyer. I grew up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and when I turned 16, I got my first job at a Sonic on the main boulevard through town. I liked it because the tips were more decent than I expected, and my coworkers were fun. The location was only about a mile from my house, straight shot down the boulevard, then a right onto my street, so I usually just walked home. My mom worked as a nurse and needed the car for her shifts, and honestly, I didn't mind walking. I was getting my steps in. This was back in 2018, right after I'd started my senior year. I usually worked the afternoon shift, 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., which meant I'd be walking home right as things got quiet. The main road stays pretty busy during the day, but by 10 o'clock on weeknights, it's mostly dead, except for the occasional car heading to or from the interstate. That Tuesday in September, it was like any other shift. We'd been slammed during dinner rush. I smelled like tater tots and cherry limeade, and my feet were aching from walking back and forth for 8 hours. I clocked out at around 10:07. I said bye to my coworkers who were closing and started my walk home. The first half mile down the boulevard was fine. Only a few cars passed by. But once I turned onto my street, it got darker. The neighborhood here was older, with lots of big oak trees that blocked out most of the streetlights. I was as familiar with this route as the back of my hand. I knew every crack in the freaking sidewalk, and every house with dogs that would bark as I passed. I was about halfway down the street when I heard a truck coming up behind me. Nothing weird about that, but what happened next really creeped me out. The truck passed, going maybe 20 miles per hour, then instantly hit the brakes. The brake lights lit up the whole street red. Then the vehicle began to back up. It backed up until it was behind me and began to follow me, keeping pace with me, maybe only a maximum of 30 feet behind me at most at any point. Not close enough to seem like they were about to run me down, but close enough that those headlights stayed on me the whole time. I could hear the engine idling along, occasionally revving up slightly when I'd speed up. I thought about making a run for it, but I figured somehow that might trigger something bad, escalate things and make it worse. This guy wasn't doing anything illegal yet, was he? I kept bouncing that thought around in my brain repeatedly. And while I did, I just walked faster, keeping my hand on my phone in my pocket. The truck followed me all the way to my house. When I turned into our driveway, it slowed down even more, practically stopping, then continued down the street. I couldn't see anything through the windshield with those bright lights on, and I couldn't even tell you what the color of the truck was beyond dark. At the time, my mom was still up watching some TV, and I burst through the door. I'm sure I looked shaken up. She jumped up, ran over to me, and asked what was wrong. I told her that a truck had followed me home, and she got a look on her face. That look she gets when she's worried or ticked off, or both. "You're taking this tomorrow," she said. She pulled something from her purse. A pink and black taser, small enough to fit in my hand. Mom, I don't think... Just take it. Keep it in your pocket where you can reach it quick. Tomorrow I'm going to ask around to see if I can carpool with a coworker. Then you can take the car if you want it. I told her that wasn't necessary. Then I went to bed. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept wondering what the guy in the truck wanted. By the next day, I had mostly convinced myself I was overreacting. The event was just weird, at most. Maybe it was someone who was lost, using me as a pace car of sorts. Or maybe they were slowing down to read street signs, and I just happened to be there. Or it could be a drunk person, doing God knows what. There were plenty of other explanations beyond being stalked. The Wednesday shift was fun. We were steady but not slammed, and I made a decent amount of tips. I had almost forgotten about the night before by then, except when I clocked out at about 10:03. I would have to start my walk home again. I made it to my street without incident. I started to relax a little. I kept my hand on the taser in my pocket, which my mom insisted I take with me. I was feeling kind of silly about it. But then I heard the same engine sound from the night before. I didn't even turn around. I kept on walking, keeping my cool, but I could see the headlight beams growing brighter on the pavement in front of me. This time the truck didn't stay back. It pulled right up alongside me and kept driving next to me. The passenger window rolled down then, and I finally got a look at the driver. It was an old white guy, probably in his 70s, with white hair and wearing what looked like a plaid work shirt. When he spoke, he had some sort of accent, some sort of Eastern European or something. You need ride. I kept walking, and I told him, No thank you, I'm good. It's not safe, young lady. You should not walk alone. I'm fine, really, I'm almost home. The truck kept creeping alongside me. The old man leaned further out the window. I insist. Please get in truck. I drive the rest of the way. Something about the way he said it made me stop walking. He stopped too, just right there in the middle of the road. Look, he continued. I am neighbor. Live just couple houses from you. The yellow house with bird bath. You know it? I did know that house. About 3 houses down from ours. I had seen an old truck in the driveway, but had never seen who lived there. It's not safe out here, he repeated. You get in, now, or maybe you end up hurt. I tell you what, you don't trust me, fine. You drive. I let you drive, rest of way home. Just get in truck. What's your name? I asked. Dmitri Volkov. Your mother, Sandra, yes? She knows me. Call her, go ahead, call her. I pulled out my phone, never taking my eyes off of him. I called my mom. She answered pretty quick, probably worried. Hey, Mom, there's a man here who says he's a Dmitri Volkov, and he claims he lives in the yellow house, and says you know him. There was a pause. Then she replied, Yes, I know Mr. Volkov. What's he want? Trying to give you a ride? Yeah. Take it. Mom. Take the ride. I'll explain when you get home. I hung up and looked at the old man. He'd already leaned over and opened the passenger sword. Against every instinct I had, I walked around and got inside. The inside of the truck smelled like cigarettes and pine air freshener. There were rosary beads hanging from the rearview mirror, and what looked like an Orthodox Christian icon stuck to the dashboard. Dmitri put the truck in drive and started crawling down the street at maybe 10 miles per hour. I apologize for scaring you, he said, focusing on the road. But this is not safe. You understand. Not safe for a young girl to walk alone after dark. Why? I asked. What's going on? He was quiet, and then eventually said, Last night, I see you walking, and I see something else following you. That's why truck was behind you. I drive with headlights, keep you safe. What do you mean, something else? I cannot explain good, but was not person, not normal. I watch from truck, but what I see, he shook his head. It is better you not walk alone. By then we were at my house. He stopped the truck and looked at me seriously. You tell your mother what I said. Tell her to call me if you need ride. But you no walk alone after dark anymore. Yes? Find other way. I thanked him and got out, still all too confused. He waited until I was inside before driving the 3 houses down to his own place. My mom was up and waiting in the living room. I told her everything Dimitri said, and she nodded, looking worried again. Go take a shower and relax, she said. We'll talk in a bit. So I did, and took a long hot shower and tried to wash off the smell of fryer grease and the weird feeling from the whole encounter. When I came back out in my pajamas, my mom was off the phone. She patted the couch next to her. You can take my car from now on, okay? She said. I'm going to be getting carpool rides with my friend Cheryl. She lives close to the hospital. Mom, what's going on? What did Mr. Volkov tell you? She explained. He wasn't trying to scare you, he didn't want to. But he said he saw something following you home last night, and claims it didn't look like a person. Not like a man and not like a woman. What does that mean? He said calling the police wasn't going to help. Neither would a taser, apparently. Police would be too late to chase off some sort of animal, and he claims the animal was too big to be affected by that taser. My stomach was doing flips. Mom, come on. I'm just telling you what he said. He described seeing something tall and thin and dark, and that's about it. Bigger than a man, but moved like a big cat. And quick. That's just crazy talk. Maybe, but he seemed genuinely scared for you. And Dimitri doesn't strike me as a man who scares easily. The guy survived the Soviet Union, came here in the 80s. He's seen things. I wanted to argue about it because it all sounded so ridiculous. But something about the whole situation felt wrong in a way that I couldn't explain. Maybe it was my mom's face. When she was this worried, there was no arguing. So, what's the plan exactly? I asked. For now, you take the car and we'll figure out something more permanent real soon. The next day I didn't work, but I found out from my mom that Mr. Volkov had called her. 2 of his cats had been found in his backyard, partially eaten. Not like a dog would do. He'd been very specific about that, because apparently he had seen that before. But not this. I was able to finance a used Honda Civic that weekend. Pretty exciting. My mom said it was time I had my own car anyway, and that she had been planning on it for graduation. But I knew the truth. She was scared. And because of that, I was scared too. I worked at Sonic before having to move off to college the next year. And I drove after every single shift. Sometimes I would see Mr. Volkov outside his house when I drove past, and he'd wave. And I would wave back. Because without him, there's a chance I may not be here to share this story. Be careful if you walk home alone in Tuscaloosa. Demon for Rent, from D.D. Dwiley. I make my living online. I publish ebooks, mostly romance and mystery, and I run several automated news aggregation sites that pull in decent ad revenue. I'm not going to say which ones for obvious reasons, but if you read indie news online, you may have stumbled across one of my articles at one point. This lets me work from home. A dream come true, really, something that I always wanted. For most of my adult life, I've lived in apartments. Studio in college, a 1-bedroom after graduation, then a series of 2 bedrooms as my income grew. Always apartments, though. I was getting tired of hearing my neighbors through the walls and smelling other people's cooking. Eventually, my boyfriend Derek and I started to look for a house to rent. I was over the moon, especially when we found one. An actual house with a yard and a garage and rooms that didn't share walls with strange people. It was a small ranch-style place built in the 70s with 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, in a quiet neighborhood in Burlington, Vermont. The rent was surprisingly reasonable too, but a lot of you might see that as the first red flag. We were so excited about having space and about being able to be loud without worrying about neighbors, plus a real kitchen with full-sized appliances. We just ignored that and signed the lease immediately. I need to be clear about something up front. I'm not a particularly spiritual person. I was raised Irish Catholic, but haven't been to church since high school. I don't read horoscopes, I don't believe in ghosts, I've always rolled my eyes at those paranormal investigation shows, even though they can be fun to watch. But I believe something is in this house with us, and I think it's demonic. The first incident that happened there was during one of the first nights. We were still unpacking and there were boxes all over. We were eating some takeout on the floor because we hadn't set up the dining room table yet. I remember I was in the kitchen breaking down some cardboard real quick when I heard Derek talking to someone in the living room. Not on the phone though, it was like an actual conversation. I thought that's strange. I walked over to see who it was, but he was alone, and he looked confused. "Oh, what? Weren't you just in here?" he asked. "Well, I've been in the kitchen for about 30 seconds, but I heard you talking to someone." "No, I thought you were standing right behind the couch. I heard you walk up and I felt someone standing there. I was telling you about the cable installation tomorrow." We both tried to laugh it off. It was an old house, we'd already heard settling noises. Maybe it was a distant neighbor's voice carrying through the walls somehow, even though that shouldn't happen here compared to our apartments. A couple of weeks after that, I was working in my office. I'd claimed the smallest bedroom as my workspace. It was about 2 a.m. I keep some weird hours sometimes because some of my sites cater to international audiences. Derek was asleep in our bedroom down the hallway. I was deep into formatting an ebook when I heard the door handle turn behind me. It wasn't a slight rattle like the house settling. This was the full motion of someone gripping and trying to turn the handle. I spun around in my chair so fast. The handle was turned completely down, but the door didn't open. It stayed like that for maybe 5 seconds, then slowly returned to its normal position. I sat there, stupefied. I waited to see Derek pushing the door open, telling me he couldn't sleep or wanted some water or something, but that never happened. When I finally got the courage to open the door myself, the hallway was empty. I could hear Derek still in bed snoring. Things escalated slowly over the next few months. We'd find cabinets open that we knew we'd closed. The bathroom faucet would turn on by itself. Not just a dripping we could have done ourselves by accident, but fully on. Our cats, Mango and Pepsi, started to act weird too, staring at empty corners and hissing at nothing, refusing to go into certain rooms at certain times. The worst of it was this feeling of being watched. It wasn't constant, but when it happened, it could be overwhelming. Like someone standing right behind you, breathing down your neck, waiting for you to turn around and look. Derek felt it too, though he was more reluctant to admit it. He's an engineer, and he likes rational explanations for everything. But even he couldn't explain away everything that was happening. Eventually, I would get a real look at our guest. I was getting water from the kitchen around 3 a.m., another late work night. The kitchen connects to the dining room through an open archway, and we have a large mirror on the dining room wall that the previous tenants left behind. As I filled up my glass, I glanced at the mirror, and I saw a reflection of something standing in the archway behind me. Something tall, I'd say about 7 feet, and bulky, and dark. I don't mean like a shadow either, but more like a hole punched into reality, shaped like a human being. It definitely had what looked to be a head, but beyond that I could not make out any features. Just a horrible, stretched out darkness. I didn't move, wasn't sure if I could or couldn't, but I knew that I couldn't breathe in that moment. All I was able to do was stare at this thing in my mirror, with my hand still on the faucet. At this point, water was overflowing from my glass. In the blink of an eye, the thing was gone. It didn't walk away or fade out, it was just gone. That kind of instant vanishing that can make you think something was never there, that you had mistaken it. But I stood there for another full minute before I could make myself turn around. The archway was empty. I didn't tell Derek right away. Didn't want to freak him out in the middle of the night. But I did in the morning. We discussed it being a car driving by, causing shadows, maybe something stuck in my eye. And though I didn't believe all of these excuses, it made me feel better. Like maybe I really was just seeing things. But then a couple nights after that, he came right into my office with a white face and asked me if we could talk. He told me that he saw it too. It was under different circumstances. He'd gotten up to use the bathroom, and he saw it standing at the end of the hallway, just outside our bedroom door. He described it the same way. Tall, bulky, extremely dark. When he blinked, it was gone. We tried to rationalize it. Can't carbon monoxide cause hallucinations? We bought detectors for every room. All negative. We checked for mold or gas leaks, anything that could cause shared hallucinations. But we still came up empty-handed. We even decided to research the history of the house. Maybe someone had died here, and it was their ghost. But the records seemed clean. The place was built in 1974, owned by the same family until 2015, then turned into a rental. No deaths or accidents or tragedies, nothing that we could find. But the activity kept escalating. The cats got worse. Mango, who's normally the bravest cat I've ever met, started to refuse to be alone in any room. She'd cry pitifully if we left her for even a moment. Pepsi developed this habit of suddenly bolting from rooms, like something had scared the heck out of him. His tail would be all puffed up like a bottle brush. Then there was a night that made me use the word demon for the first time. I was in bed. Not quite asleep yet, but I was getting there. I suddenly heard Derek's voice from my office. It was so clear, he was calling my name. "Sarah, Sarah, come here." I started to get up, but then I stopped, shook my head, and realized Derek was right next to me in bed, sleeping soundly. I got chills up my spine, and I shook him awake. "Hey, did you say anything just now?" He mumbled, something about no, that he'd been sleeping, and he'd never been one to talk in his sleep before. But then we both heard it. His voice came again, laughing. The laugh went on too long, then cut off abruptly. We stayed in bed, freaked out with the lights on until sunup. And for the first time in my life, I decided to Google demon stuff. Like, what do demons do? Or how do I know if I have a demon? I needed to know if there was something that mimicked people, or had human but impossible-looking human forms. Stuff that might affect animals. Everything pointed to something inhuman. Something that may have never been human. The old Catholic side of me wanted me to call a priest. I was a little too nervous about that, though. Like, "Hey, Father, I haven't been to Mass in 15 years, but now I've got a demon. Could you fix it?" A couple months later, there were new developments. The thing, whatever it was, began to manifest during the day. We would see quick glimpses in peripheral vision sometimes, these shadows moving independently of their sources. The bulky, all too dark figure appearing then vanishing quickly. Derek began to do work from coffee shops instead of at home. I would have done the same thing too, but my setup requires multiple monitors and a good constant internet connection. The worst incident happened 3 weeks back. Yes, as of writing this. I was alone in the house. Derek was at work, a rare in-office day for him. I was in the shower when I heard the bathroom door open. I called out, hoping it was just Derek who had come home early. But no one replied. Through the frosted shower door, I could see a dark shape standing in the bathroom, not moving, just standing right there. I turned off the water and said, "Derek?" Still, the shape didn't move, and still there was no reply. I could feel it watching me through the shower door. The last thing I wanted to do was open that door and look directly at it. So I stayed put, dripping wet and shaking. It felt as if time slowed down, because the experience seemed to last so long. But then something spoke. It wasn't Derek's voice this time, but mine. Exactly my voice saying words I'd spoken earlier that day during a phone call with my mom. "I love you too, Mom. Talk to you later." The shape moved closer to the shower door. I could see it clearly through the frosted glass. Impossibly tall and bulky. It raised what might have been an arm, reaching toward the door handle. I did the only thing I could think to do, and I prayed for the first time in so many years. The Our Father, the Hail Mary, every prayer I could remember from my childhood. I was just happy that I remembered them, because the shape stopped moving. Then, between one blink and the next, it was gone. I grabbed my towel and ran out of the house. I sat in my car in the driveway soaking wet until Derek came home 2 hours later. We've started to look for a new place, but the rental market here is brutal, and we're locked into a lease until March. Derek just wants to up and break it, but the penalty would be 2 months' rent plus losing our security deposit. We can't afford to do that, not with how much the move already cost. So we're here still. We've developed rules and coping mechanisms. Don't acknowledge it when you see it. Ignore the voices. Keep lights on in every room after dark. Now I've hung up crosses in the bedrooms, and Derek doesn't object. The cats sleep in our bed now, and we've noticed they seem to know when it's near. When they both suddenly alert to something we can't see, we leave that room. The thing is still here. Even as I'm typing this, it's 4 a.m. in that office I talked about. It's not in the room with me, but it's somewhere in the house. I don't know why, but it seems to wait for the right times, whatever it considers the right time. I don't know why it's tormenting us, but I guess demons get off on that sort of thing. We've got 4 more months on the lease, 4 more months of living with something that shouldn't exist, which wears our voices and stands in our doorways and watches us sleep. What a great roommate. Trust me, I'm counting down the days. American Werewolf in My Dreams. From Anonymous. I was 7 years old when my older brother rented An American Werewolf in London from Blockbuster, and he had told my parents it was just a comedy movie, which I guess technically people say it's a dark comedy or horror comedy, but not for a 7-year-old kid who snuck out of bed to watch through the crack in the living room door. If you've seen the movie, you know the transformation scene. If you haven't, I almost envy you. It's 1981 practical effects at their peak. No CGI, just latex and mechanics and this horrible, impossible stretching of the human body. The actor's face elongates into a snout. His hands stretch and pop as they become claws, and his spine elongates. The whole time he's like moaning or screaming or both. Just utter pain. But what really got to me at the time What burned itself into my 7-year-old brain was the final form. Those moments in the movie where you see it for a split second when it roars or growls during an attack. This massive wolf-like thing, but horribly wrong. Big and evil-looking and vicious, hunting on all fours with those yellow eyes. My parents found me crying in the hallway after the movie was over. My brother was grounded. I got put back to bed with assurances that it was just a movie, just make-believe. But by then, the damage was done. I'd seen the worst of the attack scenes, and that thing had taken up residence in my head. The nightmares started that same night and didn't stop for years. They were always the same nightmare. I'd be somewhere normal, like my school or the grocery store, my backyard even. And then I'd see it in the distance, stalking on 4 legs watching me. The dream logic would kick in, where I'd try to run but move in slow motion, try to scream but making no sound at all. It would then start to move towards me, with a speed I could not hope to match, and I would wake up right before it got to me, every single time. My parents took me to a child psychologist when I was 9, because the nightmares were affecting my sleep so badly. The doctor was a nice lady with an office full of toys and paintings of butterflies. She said it was normal that young kids sometimes fixate on scary images, that I would soon grow out of it. She taught me some coping techniques, reality checks, lucid dreaming exercises, to take control of the nightmare. They helped somewhat. The nightmares became less frequent as I got older, maybe once a month by high school, then a few times a year in college. I figured I was finally outgrowing it. It just took a lot longer than people expected. In 2019, I began to drive for Uber right after college. The job market was a mess, at least where I lived, and my life needed something flexible while I was looking for real work in my field. The money was awful, but beggars can't be choosers. And somehow I ended up enjoying many of the rides. I got to meet different people and listen to their stories, exploring parts of Denver I'd never been to. Driving at night paid better with surge pricing, so I would start to work from 8 p.m. to around 4 a.m., catching the bar crowd and late-night airport runs. There's also much less competition during that time. The first time I saw it outside of a dream was in November 2019. I had just dropped off a passenger in one of those half-developed areas on the outskirts of the city, one of those kinds of places where new subdivisions bump up against empty fields and abandoned farmland. I was heading back toward downtown, driving down a dark stretch of road with no streetlights, when my headlights caught something on the side of the road. In that kind of situation, your mind instantly goes to deer or stray dog. But as I got closer, my mind started to reject what my eyes were seeing. It was too big to be a dog, the wrong shape to be a deer. It was on all fours, but its front legs were too long, giving it this horrible hunched appearance. And its head turned to follow my car as I passed, and I saw those familiar yellow eyes and elongated snout. That thing from the movie. Exactly the thing from the movie. I almost crashed the car, swerved into the opposite lane. Lucky there was no oncoming traffic. When I looked in the rearview mirror, the road was empty. I pulled over at the first gas station I found, sat in the bright lights for an hour trying to convince myself I had imagined it. Too much caffeine, staying up too late. My mind was playing tricks on me in the dark. I even Googled Denver area wolf sightings. Maybe I'd just seen an actual wolf, and it was so peculiar and sudden that I'd warped the image of it. 2 weeks later, it happened again. This time I had a passenger with me. It was a drunk man who was heading home from downtown. We were on the highway when I saw the thing running alongside the car in the empty lane next to us. Mind you, we were going 65 miles per hour, and it was keeping up. I must have made some panicked or scared noise, because the passenger asked if I was okay. when I looked over at him, then back at the road, it was gone. "Yeah, sorry," I told him. "Thought I saw a deer." After that, these sightings became more frequent. They would happen at night when I drove, and seemingly never any other time. Luckily, they were short interactions. Sometimes I would see it standing at intersections, visible for only a moment. Sometimes I'd glimpse it in between buildings. Once I saw it on top of a parking garage, silhouetted against the sky. Looked like it was watching my car pass below. I stopped doing these Uber night shifts for a while. I thought I was having some kind of mental breakdown. So I made an appointment with a therapist. This was a different doctor than my childhood one. I told him about the nightmares returning, seeing things while driving at night. I was placed on anxiety medication, and he suggested I might be experiencing trauma responses from something, maybe not even related to the movie. The conversation just made me feel worse, not better. I knew what trauma responses felt like. This wasn't that. There was no trigger to this. It just seemed to be random. I went back to the night driving after a month, because money is money, and you kinda need it to live. I tried to ignore what I was seeing and focused on my passengers, even kept the music up loud and the conversations flowing. Some nights I wouldn't see it at all, thinking the medication was working. But then on some nights it would be somewhere, on the corner, on the side of the road, following the car. The night everything changed was in early 2020. I picked up a woman, I'll just refer to her as C, from a bar in Lodo around 1 a.m. She was in her early 30s and had been out with coworkers. She lived in Lakewood. She was tipsy but not wasted, chatty in that friendly way some passengers get. We were talking about podcasts when I saw it. It was in the middle of the road, maybe 50 feet ahead, up on all fours, standing there and waiting. I began to slow down, trying to figure out how to go around it without seeming insane to my passenger. But then something happened. C, my passenger, she stopped mid-sentence and yelled, "What the heck is that?" My heart stopped. I said, "You can see it? I mean, you see that too?" "The heck do you mean? It's right freaking there." "Is that a bear?" "That's not a bear. What the heck is that?" I swerved around it and accelerated past. In the side mirror, I saw it drop to all fours and begin to follow us. C was turned completely around in her seat, staring out the back window. "It's following us. Oh God. How's it moving so fast?" I didn't answer. I was just like, someone else can see this? Is it real? I'm not crazy, but also, oh my God, it's real. We lost it when we got back into a populated area with streetlights and traffic. C was pale. She kept asking me what it was, and if I'd seen it before. I lied about it. Not sure why. I said no, that it was a sick bear or something like that. She made me wait until she got inside her house before driving away. I even saw her peeking through her window as I left. She left me a 1-star review. The review was something like, "Driver seemed unstable, saw something on the road and didn't handle it well. Felt very unsafe." So she was already rejecting what she'd seen. Much like myself, I guess. I've seen it a dozen times since then. It doesn't always follow the car. Sometimes it's just there. Another passenger saw it too. This older woman from Ethiopia, I think. When she saw it, she just got really quiet and whispered something in a language I didn't recognize. Now, I've tried everything I can think of to understand what's going on. Have you heard of tulpas? They're these thought forms or manifestations of your mind that become real, like physically real. So maybe that's what it is. Basically, as I understand it, if you focus on a thought form, a specific image or being in your head, and obsess about it, you could manifest it into reality. What if that's what I did? My years-long terrifying obsession with this American Werewolf in London monster brought it into being. Or maybe it's not so much a real physical thing, but more an image I project unconsciously, and that's why other people see it too. I don't know, I know how crazy I'm starting to sound. I'm just glad I only see it when I'm driving. I can't imagine what I'd do if I found it one day in my room at night. If it's real enough to see, and real enough to terrify other people when they see it, does that mean it could hurt me? The Broken Man, from Frank H. I worked security at a corporate office complex in Raleigh for 6 years. 3 buildings on about 12 acres. Building A and B were active, full of tech companies and medical billing firms. Building C had been empty since 2016, when the last tenant, some kind of pharmaceutical research company, went under. The property management kept talking about renovating it, maybe dividing it up for smaller tenants, but nothing ever came of it. So it just sat there, this 3-story brick and glass structure, slowly being reclaimed by kudzu and Virginia creeper. My shift was 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 5 nights a week. Quiet work mostly. I'd do 3 full rounds a night in the golf cart they gave us, plus random walks through the occupied buildings. Building C was technically part of my rounds, but I only had to check the exterior doors, make sure no one had broken in. Easy enough. It was late September when I first heard the noises. I was doing my 2 a.m. round, cruising past Building C in the cart, when I heard what sounded like furniture being moved around inside. Scraping, dragging sounds, some thumping. I stopped the cart, grabbed my flashlight, and went to check it out. By the time I'd tried my key in the main door, the sounds had stopped. I went in anyway, did a quick sweep of the ground floor. Nothing. No signs of entry, no disturbed dust, no indication anyone had been there. Happened again 3 nights later. This time it sounded like someone was having a fight in there. Crashes, banging, what might have been yelling but muffled by the walls. I called it into dispatch, told them I was investigating a possible break-in. Same story though. By the time I got to the door, dead silence. Walked through the whole ground floor, even went up to the 2nd level. Empty. Dust undisturbed on the stairs. Over the next month, it became a pattern. Every 3 or 4 nights, always between 2 and 3 a.m., I'd hear something from Building C. Different sounds each time. Sometimes like construction work. Sometimes like someone throwing things around. Once it sounded almost like an animal in distress. But it always stopped the moment I got close to the building. I mentioned it to the other guards. Tom, who worked weekends, said he'd never heard anything. Janet, who had the evening shift, said the building gave her the creeps, but she'd never noticed any noises. Only happened on my shift, and only when I was doing that particular round. I started timing it, trying to catch whatever was happening. I'd park the cart farther away, approach on foot. I'd vary my rounds, show up earlier or later. Nothing worked. It was like whatever was making the noise could sense me coming. Property management had the building inspected for vagrants, for animals, for structural issues that might cause strange sounds. They found nothing. The HVAC system had been shut down for years, so it wasn't mechanical. No signs of people living there, no animal droppings or nests. The inspector said the building was sound, just empty. By the end of October, I'd almost gotten used to it. It was just one of those weird things about the job. Every workplace has its quirks, right? This was ours. the empty building that made noise at 2 a.m. Then came the night of November 3rd. I was doing my round as usual, had just passed the parking garage for Building A when I heard it start up in Building C. But this time was different. Usually, the sounds would last maybe 30 seconds to a minute before stopping. This time, they kept going. I could hear them clearly even from 100 yards away, rhythmic thumping, scraping, and something else. Something that sounded almost like moaning. I sat in the cart for a moment, listening. The sounds weren't stopping. If anything, they were getting louder, more intense. Whatever was happening in there, it was still happening. I made a decision that I've regretted ever since. I drove the cart to Building C, but instead of parking right in front where the motion lights would kick on, I parked around the side. I wanted to see what was causing this. After over a month of these noises, I needed to know. I used my key as quietly as possible, easing the door open just enough to slip inside. The sounds were coming from the far end of the ground floor, past the old reception area in what used to be a conference room. The moaning was clearer now, definitely human, definitely male, and definitely in pain. My first thought was that someone was hurt. Maybe a vagrant had gotten in somehow, injured themselves. I should have announced myself, should have called out to see if they needed help. But something about the whole situation felt wrong. The rhythmic nature of the sounds, the way they'd been happening for weeks, the fact that they always stopped when I got close. So instead, I crept forward, staying close to the wall, my flashlight off. The conference room door was open. Dim light was coming from inside. Looked like battery-powered camping lanterns. The moaning was louder now, mixed with other sounds I couldn't identify. Wet sounds, popping sounds, like someone cracking their knuckles, but much louder. I reached the doorway and peered around the corner. I've tried 1,000 times to figure out how to describe what I saw in a way that makes sense. I've never been able to do it justice, but I'll try. There was a man in the room. Long, dark hair, maybe in his 30s, completely naked. His body was covered in some kind of clear mucus or slime, like he'd been dipped in egg whites. He was on his hands and knees on the floor, and he was convulsing. But it wasn't like a seizure. It was more controlled, more purposeful, despite the obvious agony he was in. His arms and legs were wrong. That's the only way I can put it. They were bent at angles that arms and legs don't bend. Not just dislocated, broken, badly broken. I could see bone pushing against skin in places. But as I watched, frozen in horror, those broken limbs were moving, changing. There was a loud pop, and his left arm, which had been bent backward at the elbow, suddenly straightened out. He screamed through gritted teeth. Then another pop, and his right leg, which had been twisted at an impossible angle, rotated back to normal. Each correction was accompanied by that wet popping sound, and a fresh wave of mucus, or whatever it was, oozing from his skin. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that as his limbs straightened, they were also shortening. Like they'd been stretched out and were now contracting back to normal length. I watched his forearm visibly shrink by what had to be 3 or 4 inches, the bones grinding and creaking as they compressed. This went on for about a minute. Pop, scream, straighten, shorten. Pop, scream, straighten, shorten. Each limb fixing itself in sequence. The man's moaning never stopped. This low, desperate sound of someone in unbearable pain, but trying not to fully scream. Finally, it was over. He collapsed flat on the floor, sobbing. After a moment, he pushed himself up to his knees, reached for a towel that had been placed nearby, like he'd prepared for this, and started wiping the mucus off his body. His movements were shaky but normal. Human. His arms and legs looked completely normal now, like nothing had happened. He got dressed in clothes that had been folded neatly in the corner. Jeans, t-shirt, boots, normal clothes. Then he walked out of the room. Not toward the main entrance where I'd come in, but toward the back of the building. I followed at a distance, too stunned to do anything else. He went out the rear emergency exit, the one that was supposed to be alarmed but hadn't worked in years. I watched through the window as he walked across the overgrown parking lot and disappeared into the woods behind the property. I stood there for I don't know how long. Then I went back to the conference room. The only evidence of what I'd seen was the wet spots on the floor where the mucus had dripped, and those were already starting to dry. The lanterns were gone. The towel was gone. If I hadn't seen it myself, I wouldn't have believed anything had happened there. The noises came back the next month. 4 nights in early December, same pattern as before. I didn't investigate. I just marked in my log that I'd checked the building's exterior and found it secure. When they stopped after the 4th night, I was relieved. They never came back after that December. Building C stayed quiet for the remaining 3 years I worked there. The company finally renovated it in 2021, turned it into medical offices. I heard from Tom that nothing unusual was found during the renovation. No sign that anything strange had ever happened there. I did warn the other guards, especially the new ones. Told them if they ever heard noises from Building C, just leave it alone. Don't investigate. Some of them laughed it off, thought I was trying to scare them. Others could tell I was serious and agreed to stay away. Well done, everyone who submitted stories recently. These were actually creepy enough that I got creeped out, and I'll be skipping bringing the trash bins out to the curb for the moment. It's 1 a.m. and pitch black outside, so that's a problem for morning darkness to handle. Good night. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tales from the Break Room. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails. Send me your scary work stories at eeriecast.com/submit. Review and follow Tales from the Break Room on your favorite podcast apps, like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And while you're there, check out my new show, Night Watchers. Adults only, of course. It's an irreverent horror comedy podcast, where I discuss random horror or paranormal topics with friends or cool guests. An upcoming episode features Lyle from Oni Plays, discussing some of his creepy experiences, including my most disturbing experience at a hospital. That's Night Watchers. Anyway, I'll be clocking out for now, but you better believe I'll be back soon. Because I need the money. That's why we work, right? Till next time, everyone.